Good afternoon, everybody. I apologize for being a little bit late. We're getting into that part of the session where you have to be in three places at one time. So let me call this meeting to order. Subcommittee 4, and thank you, everybody, for attending. If we could do a roll call, please.
Furutani.
Yes.
Arambula.
Present.
Brownlee. Cook.
Here.
Jeffries.
Members, I'm going to take up the consent calendar, but before I do, just really briefly, I'd like to invite up the California Gambling Control Commission, if any representatives are here, just for a real brief comment. Yes, they are. Hello.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members. Terry Seale, California Gambling Control Commission.
Hi, Terry. Thank you for coming. And you are?
Anna Carr, California Gambling Control Commission. Good afternoon.
Just one question, and this is for a very brief discussion, and we will talk about it at length at another time. It's a particular concern of myself, and I believe the community in general, and the Pacific Islander community specifically, Pacific Islander American community. When I go to the casinos, and my mother-in-law, I'll blame it on her. My mother-in-law is an avid, she likes to go to the casino, let me put it that way. And I have a Hawaiian background, and when our relatives come and go to the California Club in Las Vegas or locally to our community Indian tribal casinos, enjoy themselves, eat a lot of good food, and have a good social interaction. But no one can help but notice the number of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in the casinos. And I think in general, one of the concerns that gets raised, along with the fact that this is a part of recreation and tourism in California and elsewhere, the underside of the whole thing is relative to problem gambling. So if you could explain just briefly, and as I said, we'll talk about this more at length another time, but I was interested and I asked the indulgence of the committee just to touch briefly on how does your commission intersect with the issue of dealing with the problem gambling issue?
The commission, the Office of Problem Gambling actually is the lead state agency and works with the communities and the locals. The commission provides the budget provides fundings for state operations and local assistance to the Office of Problem Gambling. In addition to that, we also collect fees on all the card room tables, $100 per table, and those fees annually go over to the Office of Problem Gambling. The Commission does participate in some of their workshops, and wherever we could provide support to the Office of Problem Gambling, but they are the lead agency on this.
And the Office of Problem Gambling is not directly under your jurisdiction?
No, it's under the Department of Alcohol and Drug Programs.
So that's under subcommittee, budget subcommittee 3?
Health.
So in terms of the interaction, I assume there's a lot of interaction between your commission and what they do as well?
Not really. We just stay there as an advisory group. If they need regulations, we work with them to get regulations developed and passed. The Commission approves those, but our role is really minor to that office. But we have good relationships and have worked with them now and in the past.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I apologize for having you spend the time to come all the way over here to say that, but just wanted to see how it all fit together, and we'll take it up in sub 3 and also through you vis-a-vis sub 4.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Members, consent calendars before you. Is there anything anybody wants to pull off?
Why does everybody look at me? No, I have nothing.
Mr. Chair, I would move the consent calendar.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Can I get a roll call, please?
Furutani.
Yes.
Arambula. Brownlee. Cook.
Aye.
Jeffries.
Just a brief note on that. I'm planning to get to the other members. I've had a meeting with our budget staff to look at establishing some kind of just general criteria that's going to guide how things get on the consent calendar. And I want to share that with the members just so you can get a sense of how we reach our conclusion, whether something goes to consent or not goes to consent. It's okay. Mr. Ruskin is trying to find his way. As I said, it's one of those days you have to be in 3 places at one time. Members, there's no vote-only calendar to be discussed, so we go directly to items to be heard. Let me start with saying that the area under the judicial branch, issue number 6, transparency, is going to be postponed and put over to May. Assemblymember De La Torre asked us to do that. He's been tracking that, as some know, and I'm going to ask for a lot of help from the members, particularly Mr. Arambula as well. I know that's an issue overall in terms of that area. But if we could go ahead, and the first item is under Office of Administrative Law, OAL, and item 8, 9, 10, issue number 1 is to convert funding to fee-for-service. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Susan Lapsley, Director of the Office of Administrative Law.
Please proceed.
For those of you who aren't aware of what OAL does, OAL is the Office of Administrative Law. We are sort of a control agency for the state. We're the state agency that's responsible for administrating the Administrative Procedure Act. There's over 200 state agencies that have rulemaking authority in California. Our office has a staff of about 20 staff, and we see probably 600 to 800 proposed rulemaking packages through our office each year. The 2 proposals that are in front of you are the proposal to change our office to a fee-for-service, and then also our AB 32 workload.
Any comments from the LAO or Department of Finance? None.
We would note that this proposal does have some merit. Having a fee-for-service mechanism would better link the department's activities with departments that are using their service. There are some details we worked out about the start of funding. This was a special session issue, and so there might have to be some more details ironed out of how the department would capture costs in the first few months of the year.
You were going to say something?
Jennifer Osborne, Department of Finance. We would just note that we obviously support these proposals, but would note that because the conversion to fee-to-service proposal was a special session proposal, we will be updating it in the May revision simply because it wasn't adopted as part of the special session, so there are a few technical changes that we may need to make to it.
Questions from the members? Yes, Mr. Arambula.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand, I see that the proposal has some merit, but there are some concerns, and I guess I'd like to ask the LAO for your analysis of this and any comments from other individuals. How do we make sure that a department does not delay seeking regulations because of the potential cost? You know, then a department might delay seeking those regulations, or might continue with interim regulations or underground regulations. How do we make sure there's not a disincentive for departments to do what they do currently, which is to propose regulations and have OAL review those?
Diego Martin, Legislative Analyst's Office. Well, certainly the legislature would have a big role to play in that. If there was some sort of issue that came up that's needed regulations, the legislature could direct the department to do that either through statute or through the various oversight mechanisms that you have. So we don't think that the possible disincentive should be a barrier for this proposal. As far as underground regulations, the OAL does have staff that does look into underground regulation regulations of various departments, and I think would be still well equipped to carry out that function.
But and as a follow-up, it seems to me that if it's fee for service, there are certain fixed costs, whether it's some overhead expenses or the review of underground regulations. For example, that a department does not necessarily go and say review my underground regulations. How are those to be paid for? How are the overhead expenses to be distributed if it's all fee for service?
I think some of the details still need to be worked out on that, but I think that it is our understanding that the overhead expenses will be worked into the fee that is charged. And if it is found that there would be some underground regulations, I believe the department has said that they would charge departments for that. And there's also a mechanism here where you don't necessarily have to have an agreement with the department. They can go directly to the controller and have those funds taken out of the department's budget in question. So I think that would kind of guard against some of those concerns.
And if I may direct the same questions to the Department of Finance or Finance, depending how long you've been here.
I believe that maybe the key lies in how they end up setting up their fee structure. You could definitely look at what's appropriate to be charged in overhead and what kind of things should be built into a direct rate. Additionally, to the extent that a department does underground regulations and the office is then has to go through the process of reviewing and kind of determining whether they were inappropriate, you could potentially set up some sort of fee or fine to be basically recovered from the department to cover the office's costs. I mean, at this point, my understanding is they're still working on kind of what their final, I guess, fee schedule is going to look like, and certainly we're open to suggestions from the legislature if there's a certain direction that you wish to go in putting that together to deal with those kind of specific issues. But we think it's something that could be resolved within that structure.
As you go forward in preparing the revision, I would ask that you look at certain expenses that are maybe baseline expenses that should be covered as part of the normal operation, and then perhaps additional expenses that are requested by the departments to be on a case-by-case basis. But thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions, members? Just real quickly, describe underground regulations.
Underground regulations is the terminology that's used for any regulation, and regulation is defined very broadly in California. The government code essentially defines it as any rule, regulation, order, guideline, any memo that an agency puts in writing, or that doesn't even have to be in writing, that an agency says, you will do this, and it applies generally. So it's very broad in California. So any regulation is required to go through the APA process, which involves public notice, public comment, consideration by the agency that's adopting it, and then actual review by our office.
And then until it does all that, it's considered an underground?
If an agency is enforcing an underground regulation or has issued an underground regulation, yes, or they're using that, they're using underground regulations.
Okay. Any comments from the public?
Which is prohibited. An agency is not allowed to do that in the government code, just so we're clear.
Okay, good. Can I get a motion, please? No. Oh, we're holding this? Well, it says right here. Where's the recommendation?
No. I think it's under tab 1, tab 2 here.
Oh, okay. We are going to hold this open. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, Mr.
And I
Chairman.
assume you're doing the second one as well? The AB 32.
AB 32, our request on AB 32 is a request for additional positions. Our office has seen, as I stated previously, we have a very small office with very lean budget, lean staff, 20 staff members, 10 of those are attorneys, then 2 myself and my deputy director. that perform the review of these 600 to 800 rulemaking packages per year. Our office, with the advent of AB 32 and ARB issuing their scoping plan, our office has experienced an increase in workload, primarily because these rulemakings tend to be very large, highly complex. They're not. It's usually not just one regulation. It's hundreds, many regulations, and it's with thousands of public comments. So they're not easy to get through, and they take a lot of time and a lot of resources. So we've asked for additional staff to be able to deal with this workload.
Comments from the resource table? Department of Finance or?
We have no issue with this request.
Questions from the members? Mr. Arambula?
Could you give us your analysis of the benefits, the pros and cons of permanent versus limited term, particularly given some of the uncertainty surrounding the pending initiative?
The positions were proposed as permanent. Obviously, there's some uncertainty about the longevity of that law, and to the extent any major changes occur, we would obviously look at all of the departments that a large change in law would affect, and adjust their budgets accordingly through the budget process. I mean, it happens whenever there's an initiative that creates cost to a department. We go through that process, and we would see the same process working in basically as on a negative basis if that was to occur. They do. I think there would be a winding down that would have to occur if that initiative.
If you look at the scoping plan, from my perspective, administrating the agency, it's much easier to fill a permanent position than it is a temporary position. We're not a large agency, so I can't pull resources from other places. And people take a look at my agency and go, oh, it's a temporary spot. I really don't want that. As it relates to AB 32, if you look at the scoping plan, and for those of you who are familiar with it, it's ongoing from now until at least 2020. So, yeah, they're initiating these rulemakings, but they still have to come back and they have to fine-tune them every year. And even if, hypothetically, I think we had a discussion that even if the proposal to repeal AB 32 goes through, ARB is going to have to then come back to us to have all those regulations repealed. They don't just automatically fall off the books. So I would argue that it's really an ongoing basis, not just a one-time shot.
Okay, thank you.
Other members? Comments from the public? I don't think there would be. We're going to hold this open as well as sort of hinging on the first one as well. So give us a little bit more time and we'll work this out. Also, there's some political things in the wind and see how those play out as well.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. We're going to 0250 Judicial Branch. Issue number 1, facility modification funding. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members. I'm Ron Overholt, Chief Deputy Director of the Administrative Office of the Courts.
Please go ahead.
Item number 1 is the facility modification. The governor's budget proposes $35 million on a 2-year limited term basis to increase the funding for needed facility modifications from the State Court Facilities Trust Fund. So it does not ask for funding from the general fund for this purpose. The background, the Judicial Branch on behalf of the state is now responsible for 532 court facilities around the state that were previously the possessions of counties. With the transfer of those buildings, and most of them occurred in the last year and a half, comes a large need for modification and fixing up these facilities that are quite old and in need of work. We currently have a modification budget of about $50 million with $10 million in reimbursements where we are in joint facilities with counties. So counties pay a part of these modifications. We have a list of about 3,850 different projects that are awaiting construction and funding. So based on the timing of this particular issue, we urge approval of it. The courts assumed responsibility for these facilities that, as I mentioned, are in quite bad shape, and received those buildings mostly in the last year and a half. The trial court facilities bill passed in 2002, and so counties were not really encouraged to sink some of their funding into modifying and maintaining these facilities. So the need is great and has been built up. So there's a time sensitivity to this proposal.
Any more presenters on the issue?
No.
Department of Finance, LAO, any comments? Questions from the members?
One brief question. At the higher amount, will that, at the higher amount, are we making progress in whittling down the estimated need?
Well, the need is great. As I mentioned, 3,850 projects that have been identified. That doesn't mean there aren't other projects, but it certainly allows us to start the process. We weren't permitted to use any state funds on county buildings until they were transferred. So there's a real backlog of needs that have been built up since at least 2002, and we've had most of these buildings for a year or less, so we're really just getting started.
Okay. Thank you.
Any comments from the public? You know, just in looking at this overall issue and notwithstanding the merits of the request, this is a part of an overall bigger picture relative to the whole situation with the courts and the building and modernization and construction. So we're going to hold it open. Clearly, decisions will start to have to be made soon, but I'm still trying to get a better sense of it, and we've been meeting with other staff as well. So we're going to hold it open at this time.
Okay, thank
So
you.
thank you very much for your presentation. Issue number 2, Third Appellate District Court temporary space.
The Third District Court of Appeal that's located here in Sacramento is currently having its traditional home in the Library and Courts building renovated. The Department of General Services is conducting this project, and so the Third District Court of Appeal is in temporary space while the renovations take place. Because of the concerns in the last year of the Pooled Money Investment Board in terms of having funds available to engage in the rehabilitation of the building, the project has been delayed. And so for that reason, the proposal is to realign the funding for the project, for the rent, for the swing space for the Court of Appeal to align with the time frame that's necessary. So it adds essentially a year, slightly more, to the need for the temporary space.
Pretty straightforward. Comments from anybody? Questions from members? Public? Recommendation to approve this. Can I get a motion, please? Thank you very much. Moved. Can I get a courtesy second? Second. Thank you very much. A roll call, please.
Furutani?
Yes.
Arambula? Brownlee? Cook?
Aye.
Jeffries?
Thank you very much. That's out. That's 1 for 2. Not bad.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go to number 3.
Item number 3, the governor's budget proposes $845.7 million in lease revenue bond authority for the construction phase of 7 projects. Those projects are in Madera, San Bernardino, San Joaquin, Riverside, Tulare, San Benito, and Calaveras counties. The State Court Facility Construction Fund will support the bond debt service payments on these, so there is not a general fund impact for these projects. All of these projects have been approved through the acquisition, preliminary planning, and working drawing phases, and are essentially ready to go. So we believe we have these, all the planning has been done, they're shovel ready. We estimate 19,000 jobs will be created by the construction of these badly needed courthouses.
Other parts of the presentation? Comments, Department of Finance, LEO? Questions, members? Yes, Mr. Cook.
Yeah, I just want to review the bidding one more time. Obviously, there was something about San Bernardino, Riverside County that caught my attention, but I won't be the bad guy. But I am concerned about, these things are very, very important to some of us, and I'm just afraid of where they get rolled up into this comprehensive, one vote, whether this is going to affect this, and if you could kind of explain that a little bit more. I just don't want this to fall through the cracks, at least from my perspective.
Absolutely. Appreciate that, Mr. Cook. As I get my feet wet relative to this huge issue, getting some temporary space and rental, that's one thing. But these projects, as I understand them, Mr. Cook, are sort of separate from the overall general look at construction and future, so forth and so on. But it is a part of the bigger whole. As we move forward, I'm committed to looking at these separately as we are right now, but to ask that we hold this open right now as we advance this discussion around the broader strategy. There's so many pieces of this puzzle, but this one stands on its own, so we would look at it in that regard in the immediate future when we get ready to do the hard votes.
And I understand that, and I respect what you're trying to do. I'm just very, very concerned about, obviously, the unemployment rate in these two counties being very, very high, and jobs, construction, things of that nature. So I appreciate you addressing that issue.
Thank you, Mr. Cook, and we will be voting in the next month. So that's when we make the tough decisions. So we'll be holding this open, but what Mr. Cook referenced, I think is really important to acknowledge. These 7 projects don't just automatically fall into the bin with everything else. They're separate onto themselves, so we'll look at them in that way.
Thank you.
Okay, number 4.
Item 4 is quite similar to item 3, with the exception that the funding for these 2 projects would come from the immediate and critical needs account, which came from SB 1407 rather than the Trial Court Facilities Trust Fund. The governor proposes $73.7 million, $23.7 in lease revenue bond authority, and $50 million from the immediate and critical needs account to fund these 2 projects, one in Solano County, which is renovation of the historic courthouse in Fairfield, and the other is a new courthouse in Dublin, which is East County, Alameda County. Item 2, the Alameda County project, is a joint project with the county. So the county is ready to go on this project. They've provided the land in Dublin for this project, and so they're ready to go. The county will finance and manage the design and construction of the project, and the state will participate with the amount of funds that I indicated. So both of these projects are also ready to go.
I would think you would fall under the same category as we just talked about. I'm expecting to have the path to my door pretty worn out pretty soon by my colleagues as we look at where I have one as well. So we'll be talking about this, but the votes are right around the corner. We just have to get through this process a little bit more.
Understood.
So we're going to hold it over.
Thank you.
And good point, Les. Thank you. Is there anybody in the public that wants to comment on any of this? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see you way back there in the shadows. Please come forward. Welcome. If you could start with your name and affiliation.
Hello, my name is Karen Norwood. I'm president of ASME Local 3302 for the LA Superior Courts, representing over 500 employees. I'm here today to briefly discuss the shortages of fundings for the courts throughout the state, but particularly for the LA Superior Courts, which is the largest court in the country. We have been actively working to try to find every penny of savings to help protect our people sworn to serve, the domestic violence victims, foster children, and other members of the public at risk without their court system. We want to be very clear. We are not objecting to any of the 41 building projects under SB 1407, but we want to make 2 or 3 points on this area where we see a cost savings. Given the current budget crisis, we want to ask, is there a potential for other approved projects to see similar significant cost increases like we are seeing in the Santa Clarita project? And does the 1407 program have enough funds to cover any other unexpected cost overruns? We also want to encourage this committee to look at other funding areas and cost efficiencies, particularly the court case management system, better known as the CCMS program. We currently have a functioning system within the LA Superior Courts. The AOC decided to implement the court case management system at the cost of $235 million that has now ballooned into nearly $2 billion. This system does not function properly in our courts. We only have one courtroom that has a small claim system. The contract with Deloitte Consulting is out of warranty, and all the enhancement costs are very extremely costly. The system is a substandard, so substandard that the Sacramento Superior Courts pulled out of the CCMS system as early as yesterday. Several of you are new to the committee. There are several key issues such as these we want to take a look at the Superior Court system. It is not just jobs. Thousands of court employees who are slated to be laid off in the coming year provide key services for our public. The basic services we provide are constitutionally required as due process under the law. That guarantee will be broken with the current plan of reduction in staff, elimination of programs, and the closures of courthouses. We look forward to meeting with you individually and to working with you in partnership on the ongoing basis to find real workable solutions to the challenge we are facing in these difficult times. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really greatly appreciate you coming here and testifying. We will stay in communication with you. We're going to hold this one over as well and hold it open because of the bigger questions that you just spoke to a certain degree relative to some of your concerns and your organization's concern. So we'll make sure you know as we proceed, and as I said, it'll be in May, so we'll be making some of the hard choices then and would really appreciate your continued feedback and input.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Is there any other comments from the public? Thank you very much, members. I'm sorry, are there any questions that you might have? This will be held open as well. If we can go to issue number 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This item involves 4 trailer bill proposals that I've asked Janice Norman from our Office of Governmental Affairs to join me and present on this item.
Thank you. Janice Norman on behalf of the Judicial Council. Before you are 4 proposals that we think are worthy of consideration. The first relates to comprehensive collections. As this committee knows, with the work of former Chair Mr. Arambula, the issue of collecting court-ordered debt has been a issue of concern for Sub 4. As it stands right now, there is about $5.9 billion in uncollected court debt. This proposal is aimed at refining that number to determine what is collectible, providing some increased tools that would allow courts to collect more revenue, and streamlining the activities of the court and county programs so that more programs are implementing best practices. Assuming you want me to go down the list, Mr. Chair. The parking penalties, I should note on the first one, that is a joint measure with us and CSAC. The second one is also a joint measure between the Judicial Council and CSAC related to clarifying hold harmless language in terms of auditing counties and local parking enforcement agencies. We carried a bill, we being the Judicial Council, sponsored a bill in 2007 that went into a public safety omnibus bill that inadvertently removed an offset provision that counties that sort of assessed parking fees could hold back a portion of that parking fees to pay for their local court construction funds. We inadvertently removed that, and we have just put counties on notice in 2009, and this provision went into effect in 2008. And so all the language would do is basically request hold harmless language in terms of auditing so that counties and local parking enforcement agencies aren't dinged for not submitting revenue they had no idea they were responsible for submitting. The third proposal relates to a table in the government code related to how much a local can retain and keep of criminal fines and penalties after the court facilities have transferred to the state. Basically, the table has some errors in it. There's about 13 counties that we believe need to have corrected amounts in their tables. The counties of Sutter and Plumas have come forward proactively and asked for those to be addressed. The Judicial Council is working with CSAC to determine whether or not there are others, and we've already sort of identified 13, and we're reaching out to those 13 counties to make sure that our information is correct, and we will check the rest of the table as well. The legislature has corrected this table in the past, sort of on a county-by-county basis. In prior years, we corrected it for Fresno County and Madera County. This time, the Judicial Council and CSAC are sort of looking at a comprehensive approach to fix this table once and for all. The last proposal is a proposal that the council is sponsoring on its own. It's not a measure that we've done in conjunction with CSAC. As you know, the legislature has authorized the new Long Beach Courthouse project to be conducted as a public-private partnership. In our review of how that contract will be put together, there is a potential that a possessory tax interest could be levied upon the state. And so you would have an instance in where the state, because we've chosen to sort of test out public-private partnerships, would now be responsible for an annual tax liability, potentially in the neighborhood of $4 to $5 million annually. This language, modeled after existing language in the Streets and Highways Code, would basically allow the state to continue its current practice of not having to pay property taxes. And those quickly are the 4 proposals before you today.
Correct. Comments from the Department of Finance or LAO's office?
Drew Soderborg, Legislative Analyst's Office. At this point, we're still studying the proposals, so we don't have any specific comments.
Appreciate it. Mr. Rambula, it was referenced that some of this came up under your tenure as chair. Any comments relative to?
I am curious on the debt, whether the courts are looking at the possibility of private entities doing some of the collection.
Currently, we contract with private agencies depending upon sort of the expertise of the court program. If a court program feels that a particular case is best served by their in-house, they will keep it in-house. If they feel that it's best served by a private vendor, they'll refer it to a private vendor. In some cases, if they feel that it's best served, that it will be served by FTB, they'll also submit it to the Franchise Tax Board. So it depends on a case-by-case, court-by-court, county-by-county basis on whether or not it's submitted to a vendor. But there are private vendors being used, sir.
And as a follow-up, are the courts exploring the possibility of selling discharge debt?
We've had preliminary conversations between our enhanced collections unit and the Department of Finances, and I'm going to get the name of their section wrong, but it's the section that deals with accounts receivables. And we don't have a firm proposal on selling court order debt, but it's something that we are actively exploring.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Members, any other questions? It's nice to see Dan here to see how well I'm doing as a new chair, or did you have something to say from LA County, sir?
Mr. Chair.
Oh, thank you.
Mr. Chairman and members, Dan Wall representing the Board of Supervisors of Los Angeles County. Prior to the start of this hearing, we did not have a position on the possessory interest issue with regard to the Long Beach Courthouse, but I did get an email, but we haven't officially transmitted a letter to you. So I would like to express concerns at this point, and we will get you a letter. We're concerned about a couple of things. Obviously, the revenue issue. To the extent that a private entity is holding a lease on this, they are obligated to pay a possessory interest tax. To the extent that we forgive them that, I think you have a revenue problem. I think you potentially have a constitutional problem in that you can't grant a statutory exemption from property tax. Property tax is a constitutional obligation. We are at a disadvantage, and it may have been my fault. I think the AOC's been very upfront about this. I have no problem. They communicated with us early and often. I want to make sure you know that. I don't think I have the language as to how this is going to work statutorily. And as soon as I get that language, then we'll be able to comment more effectively. But to the extent that any time a public-private partnership is done in the future, and that seems to be a trend given budget constraints, then this issue is going to come up. It's going to affect the revenues going to schools, which will affect the state of California's budget. So, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir, welcome.
Mr. Chairman, members, Greg Cook, representing the California Assessors Association. And we, too, I want to echo the comments that Mr. Wall made. We, too, have concerns about the process and with the constitutionality of the issue. Again, the Judicial Council has been straight up. They've been in conversations with us. The Judicial Council did meet with the County Council and the Assessor's Office in Los Angeles to see if there was something that could be worked out contractually as opposed to legislatively. They were unable to do so, so we're very cautious and concerned about how this might go forward. And again, constitutionality is the basic issue.
Thank you very much. Yes, welcome.
Mr. Chair and members, Elizabeth Howard Espinosa on behalf of the California State Association of Counties, here specifically as it relates to the first 3 of the 4 trailer bill proposals that are before you. We appreciate the subcommittee's attention and interest in these issues. We are here working collaboratively with the Judicial Council, particularly in the Comprehensive Collections Program. This is a reflection of a long-standing commitment to improving the collection of court-ordered debt and the respective court orders across the state. We have worked for many months to sift through a variety of proposals, and what we have presented to the committee are the 5 key proposals that we think would make the most impact in the near term, and we encourage you to consider that with the most positive perspective that you can. The second 2 proposals we view as more technical or corrective in nature. We have provided you with some background information on both of those proposals. I would just add that on Government Code Section 76,000 fix, as Janice indicated, we do anticipate that we will be making perhaps up to a dozen changes in that table, and we hope we do that once and for all, and won't be back on another day to tell you that there are other errors that we've discovered, but we thank you for your attention and look forward to working with you and your staff in the weeks ahead.
We thank you for your work. Any other questions, members? Obviously, some open-ended things, so we're going to hold this open as well. Not that we don't want to make any decisions, but we're going to put all the pieces together, and then we'll do the hard job that we were elected to do, and that's the vote. So we'll get that done. Staff, any other issues we want to deal with? Then this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.